Well, the Big City Mayors gathering in Ottawa is part of the pre-budget consultations, but the mayors say they can't necessarily wait for the next federal budget to get emergency funding for housing. They also want billions of dollars more from the federal government for transit. Don Iveson is the mayor of Edmonton and the chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus. He joins me now. Mayor Iveson, good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. Let me start. The Prime Minister was at your session today, and what he said was that some provinces are standing in the way of federal money for infrastructure projects, saying they don't necessarily agree with Ottawa's commitment to having money go to some tangible assets and so on. What's he talking about? Has he got a point?
Well, it's one of the challenges. I mean, even having a very willing federal partner that has made unprecedented commitments to transit, unprecedented commitments to housing and other key infrastructure that mayors have been talking about for years, the challenge is that that has to cascade through provinces for the most part. Now, where we have had some great success are some of the new housing initiatives. The federal government listened and said, we're going to send money directly through to local governments and partners. Likewise, on things like the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, there's an opportunity for us to apply direct. So what we're starting to see more and more of is a need for new kinds of programs where the federal government can work directly with local governments because, quite frankly, some provinces aren't playing ball, and that's holding up results for Canadians that we all depend on.
When you say they're not playing ball, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, one tangible example that we discussed at length with Minister Morneau today is our challenges around cannabis. The federal government was very generous in vacating some of their share of the revenues and leaving a larger share for provinces on the expectation, the publicly stated expectation, that provinces were going to share that with local governments. And in only 3 out of 10 provinces do we actually have agreements in place. So this just really underscores the need for continued direct dialogue between local government leaders and the federal government. And we've had great access, but we want to build on that into something more formal and more predictable that will stand the test of time, where we can solve some of these challenges, work together to bring provinces to the table to be more active partners in city building and nation building.
Right, provinces you'd expect would fight that.
Well, I think some of them see the value of it. So again, it's a mixed bag across the country, and where a province is abdicating responsibility, whether it's around cannabis and public safety and working with local governments, or whether it's around climate change, those orders of government who are prepared to take leadership and work on these difficult issues on behalf of Canadians need a space to be able to do that, and for us to then be able to invite provinces in to be part of the solution.
Some of the mayors have said, look, they need help with emergency housing. We've got roughly 20,000 asylum seekers being admitted to Canada from the United States in the past couple of years. They're saying that's putting enormous pressure on local housing needs. What's the bottom line for some of these cities when it comes to housing funding?
So the mayors had a really good conversation today with a number of key government ministers and the Prime Minister about our housing needs. And the government is responding with the National Housing Plan and has made adjustments based on our feedback. And some of our feedback is that there are issues of emergent need. But there's the underlying issue itself, which the government is stepping up and meeting. And we look forward to housing all of the vulnerable people in the fullness of time over the next decade with collaboration and partnership. And again, this is one of those areas where we need to bring provinces in, because you've got willing local partners with land and agencies we want to work with. We've got federal investment. Sometimes the missing piece of the puzzle is provinces. So again, the need for an intergovernmental forum to solve some of these larger issues and not be responding as much, but more working upstream in terms of prevention.
But this sounds like this is money that's some mayors are asking for over and above the National Housing Program money. The Mayor of Ottawa is saying, look, it's costing $6 million a year in additional housing costs for asylum seekers who are moving into this region where we're sitting now. Is that a problem? Does the federal government need to look at providing emergency housing funding now for many of your big city members?
Well, each one of our cities has unique needs and needs to be able to bring those to the federal government. Ideally, those fit within a larger national strategy, and hopefully there'll be resources available. The federal government sounded responsive to those issues and had clearly heard them in the case of Toronto, and was amenable to working with the other folks who've identified that issue.
You're also making a pitch, $34 billion over 10 years starting in 2028 for public transit. Now, that's a big issue you've been pushing, and other mayors as well. You want that to be a permanent model. What would that money be used for? And how do you get 10 years out is a long time. New governments come in and say, you know what, that's not a priority for us anymore. We need to do something else with the money, or we need to cut expenses. So what's the value of a permanent model that far out?
Well, we went decades without substantial investment and certainly without sustained investment in public transit, and we have the gridlock to show for it in our largest cities now. And so the federal government's leadership with respect to public transit with their commitment in this decade has been phenomenal. The challenge is if you're the Mayor of Toronto, you're working on the downtown relief line, and that doesn't complete until after the end of the current program. So for some of these large transit projects, we need to be able to look out beyond, because a 10-year commitment's great until you're in year 2 or 3 or 4 of it, and then you can see the sunset of it. So that's why we're proposing really that the level of investment in that 10th year of the current program be extended for further years so that we can all plan for these major transit projects in an orderly fashion, get best value for money, and integrate the work in a way that's most cost effective for Canadians and gets the results of shorter commutes, cleaner air, and everything else, that the affordability that comes with a great transit system.
Do you think your voice gets a little louder, your clout gets a little heftier perhaps in an election year with Canadians going to the polls in 9 months from now?
Well, certainly the conversation around transit, for example, has been very positive. It's been a winning issue for the government. You know, all parties in the last election said they were committed to a long-term transit strategy. So with that sort of decade look out secured, now really the next milestone is that permanent transit commitment. If we could secure that in this budget, then that would take it out of the election mix, and we could focus on other issues and have the summer to do the planning and the engineering work and look to create those jobs and relieve those commuters sooner rather than later. So we'd like to build on the success around transit. There seems to be a broad consensus there that, and it is an important ballot box issue in all of our largest cities where commuters are frustrated.
All right, Edmonton Mayor Don Iveson, the chair of the Canada's Big City Mayors Caucus. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming by.
Pleasure.